Dr. Addison, I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to kind of talk about this topic. I know we've got, three segments put together to kind of share with you. And really the purpose of this first segment is to talk about, the speed and the pace of AI and how it's impacting healthcare, how it's impacting healthcare education, and then how some institutions are providing guidance around the use of AI in the classroom, and certainly the standards and expectations of both the student and the faculty guidance associated with that. As Dr. Addison shared, I brought a bit of a ringer with me today, and that is our Director of Academic and Innovation, our Executive Director, John McKenzie. And John is going to kind of give us a little bit of that sampling of what is disrupting the space, the pace of that, and then again into those guidelines. So without further ado, John McKenzie.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ray. So today I wanted to kick off by just talking initially about the purposes of AI in healthcare, and of course also in health education. One of the phenomena that I have found, and I've been talking on our campus and at conferences and so forth around AI for a while now. One of the phenomena that I've found is frequently the conversation starts with topics related to academic integrity. And I think those are important topics, and we'll get to those. We will talk about those. But they're, in my mind, the least interesting aspects of AI when you compare it to all of the potential outputs that AI has for healthcare and health education. And so when we think about the purposes of AI in healthcare, I think it's helpful to think about four primary purposes. The first, obviously, of course, is enhancing patient care and the capacity that AI has currently and in the future to affect the patient care journey. Secondly is how AI can help support healthcare professionals. You'll see some examples of that a little later today as well. Third, how AI supports accessibility to healthcare in the first place and the safety of healthcare when it's received for all patients. And finally, the perspective that rather than what a lot of people will focus on is, will AI replace us, for example, that we ought to be viewing AI as a complementary tool rather than a replacement. And so we're going to focus on four overall focal points. The first is that trajectory of AI capabilities and its adoption rate within healthcare. The second is AI healthcare tools that are available today that you could implement at your clinic, your practice, your hospital, wherever you're at. The third is AI core competencies in medical education. So what ought we be preparing our students for and how? And then finally, ethical and legal considerations. And Dr. Ray will share with us a case study from Duke. So let's start with those trajectories. And I like to talk initially just about the pace of change and the rate of change with AI. I have become known around here for saying that the pace of AI or the rate of change is such that it is changing faster than we can make time to actually talk about what those changes are. And so just a kind of initial touch point about the rate of adoption. We all started talking about ChatGPT around November of 2022. Not a lot of people necessarily know that it was the fastest growing consumer application in history in terms of adoption. By January of 2023, it had already reached 100 million monthly active users. That's just 2 months after its launch. And if we kind of keep up with that pace of change, by March of 2023, that's 2 months later, there were already over 14,000 AI startups in the United States alone. And if we keep that running and we look at July of 2024, there were over 57,000 AI companies currently operating around the world, 25% of which were based in the US. 35% of the world's businesses work with AI in just this past summer. And the global AI market had shown a 50% increase since 2022, and there's no signs of any of that slowing down. One of the things that first grabbed our attention in medical education was when stories started coming out about AI chatbots passing the US medical licensing exam. And what we see here is a chart showing change over time in the performance of various AI tools against the USMLE Step 1 exam. This was the track record up to December of 2022, and it was world news when a AI chatbot passed USMLE Step 1 for the first time, but it barely passed, just barely, just above 60%. By July of 2023, only 7 months later, this was what the comparison looked like in the field. And you had open evidence AI scoring above 90% on the US medical licensing exam for the first time. In no time whatsoever, we're going to be talking about AI not missing any questions on these exams. And so it's a remarkable pace of change to say that in only 7 months, performance increased that much. But of course, actual healthcare providers don't get to answer multiple choice questions about what their patients have. There's a lot more that goes into diagnosing and treating a patient. So, let's take that further and see where we're going with AI. So in terms of that trajectory, maybe 3 quick takeaways. The first is AI is the fastest tech adoption in history. The second is that AI performance is already rapidly accelerating, and the things that we talk about that it's capable of today don't adequately express what it's capable of tomorrow. So let's focus for a minute on what AI solutions exist today. One of my pet peeves is that a lot of people will focus on statements like AI is the future. And while that's true, it leads off something very important. AI is also the present, and that's what we want to capture in this section of today's presentation. And so I'm going to very quickly move through some example of tools that can be adopted today or used today or that exist today that are available for healthcare now. The first is one that I think any healthcare provider that has ever needed to fill out electronic medical records ever would immediately recognize the utility for. These are tools for AI-powered medical scribing. This is just one of many tools in this field. This is DeepScribe AI. Essentially how it works is it will listen to your patient encounter. It records, it transcribes the conversation. It's smart enough to filter out small talk, and it generates complete EHR-ready notes. That then requires only the provider to check off on their accuracy. They report that it reduces provider burnout by reducing paperwork, and the providers have time to see more patients in a day. What they're reporting is on average about 2 extra patients per day per provider. So essentially, this is a tool that immediately reduces burnout, one of the biggest problems in healthcare, and at the same time pays for itself by allowing those providers to see more patients, which in turn creates better community health outcomes by allowing more patients to receive care in the first place. A second tool, or a second way that we're seeing AI tools used is for clinical decision support. So this tool is called Glass Health, and the way Glass Health works is you would enter a quick patient summary similar to how you might report in a clinical handover, or you might summarize in an EHR record. You just provide it just like you would to, a colleague. You then press a button that says generate differential diagnosis, and the AI will generate a differential diagnosis for you. You click a second button that says generate clinical plan, and it will generate a clinical treatment plan for that patient as well. So essentially it provides an AI-powered consultation on most medical questions or most patient situations that may come up. And as of this summer, it integrates directly with electronic health records as well. So how I see this primarily being used is you're diagnosing a patient and you're pretty sure you know what's going on. But before you call your specialist buddy down the street, you ask AI essentially, and it provides verification that you're on the right track. It also may provide information that you hadn't thought of, or a potential item on the differential that you hadn't thought of. And it, is a kind of middle step between that first visit and that follow-up visit with a specialist. A third tool is, or a third use is autonomous robotic surgery. And I think this one is one that surprises people the most. I think most people, if you ask, do we have robots that are on their own performing surgery today? They would answer no. But the reality is Johns Hopkins had a research project 2.5 years ago. There's a video of it on YouTube, by the way, of an autonomous robot performing a small bowel anastomosis surgery. For that surgery, the human surgeon only had to do a couple of things to make sure to facilitate the robot doing the rest. The human surgeon only conducted the initial incision. It removed extra suture thread in the procedure, and the robot would show it essentially a picture of what its plan was, and the human surgeon would approve that plan before it proceeded. That's it. Fourth example gets into mental health, and there are tools for even pediatric mental health companionship, essentially. A tool called Backpack Healthcare works essentially through bibliotherapy. It's an app that children can use to create an avatar of themselves and then create stories where that avatar of themselves are kind of moving through the world. It also collects daily data on mood and sleep patterns and symptoms, writes progress notes, notifies parents, and schedules a virtual therapist if any kind of urgent treatment is needed, and essentially is a kind of ongoing checkup and ongoing conversation between therapy sessions. The immediate utility of this is apparent. Radiology is one of those areas where a lot of people have said quite a bit about what AI is already capable of. We're seeing examples, not just in radiology, but also pathology as well, where the AI is able to detect or see things that sometimes human eyes don't quite detect the same way. So RAD AI is a tool on the market now that interprets radiology images. It provides its own impressions and recommendations, and it will do it in the radiologist's preferred language. They report that it's saving 60 minutes per shift and 84% reduction of burnout among their radiologist users. How about AI home healthcare? I had the privilege of seeing these two tools presented at an AI conference last month. These are Smart Companion and Voice Health. These are Amazon Alexa device integrated AI tools that will provide things like medication reminders, care verification, care coordination. It will have a conversation with your patient. One of the major purposes is to reduce readmittance rates into hospitals after a patient leaves the hospital. It's doing social determinants of health monitoring, and what they report is a 38% reduction in 90-day hospital readmittance on the basis of using these products. So, I shared these to just give a quick sense. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of more examples of AI healthcare tools on the market today. But I want to capture that when we're talking about AI, we're not talking about the future, we're talking about right now. And the biggest takeaway of that message for me is the students that we are preparing right now don't need information about the future so much as they need the present, because preparing them for the present of graduating and moving into clinical practice is also about preparing them for the AI tools that exist today and what's coming. So that leads us to our third section, transformations, or creating the provider of the future. So I like to focus on on a few foundational AI competencies for medical education. And when I say foundational, I mean these are the basics. Every student should graduate with these competencies in any health field. The first is understanding AI limitations. So for all of the amazing tools that we just saw examples of, they all have their own limitations, and preparing our students to understand what those limitations are, how AI works, that's essential. The second is around accountability. A student needs to have a very clear understanding that when they use AI-generated results in their clinical practice, who holds accountability for those results? It is not the AI. For the patient, they are looking at their provider. And so that accountability taking is a competency that our students need to be prepared for. They are the ones ultimately responsible for how AI-generated results are used. The third is around navigating privacy and HIPAA concerns with AI. This is changing all of the time, but of course, understanding machine learning and how it works with large data sets and big data, there are some very strict guidelines that we ought to be following about what we do and do not put into AI engines, especially around HIPAA protected information. Essentially, we shouldn't be putting protected information into AI engines unless we specifically have a contract that describes how that information is going to be used and protected in HIPAA compliant ways. Then we need to focus on how does the student see themselves in the world in this kind of new AI powered age, and focusing on recognizing the continuing value of their own expertise and their own patient-centered communication. That leads to a kind of a growth mindset as well that's focused on continuous learning. If we focus on that pace of change for AI, it's important to recognize that just how they already receive continuing education credits or seek out continuing education after they graduate, they need to be doing the same thing when it comes to understanding the capabilities of AI and how it influences their clinical workspace and the nature of healthcare. But once we get past those basics, we can think about some more advanced competencies. Are we preparing our students to carry out AI-enhanced clinical encounters, and how are we doing that? Are we preparing our students to not just use AI tools, but also evaluate prospective tools that they may be looking at, conducting that evidence-based evaluation based on quality and accuracy, safety, the contextual appropriateness, and also bias. And are they able to adjust for AI integrated workflows and team dynamics, whether within their own profession or in an interprofessional setting? And then finally, are they able to describe or understand those socio-political implications of AI tools, how it's changing the nature of healthcare, the nature of work itself for that matter, and what its impacts are on justice, equity, and ethics? If that's not a part of our curriculum, then it needs to start being immediately. There are a few challenges, of course, when it comes to using AI for medical education. It's something new. Something new always comes with a kind of initial lift, right? A couple of those lifts are, what does it look like to implement a technological framework and infrastructure for using AI in our medical education curriculum? You know, how do we facilitate that? How do we implement that? What do we need to change or bring into our simulation centers, for example? How about ethical challenges regarding patient confidentiality and cybersecurity? We kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. The clear ethics around confidentiality and the use of AI tools is still developing because these are new. What we do know is we need to protect the privacy and confidentiality of our patients' information. What we don't know yet in every single case is how that information is being used in conjunction with AI tools. And so investigating that is important. The pace of AI feedback, I think this is an interesting one. If you ask any of our faculty in any of our programs on this campus, what is the #1 request that they get from their students? I can tell you exactly what it is. It's, we want more practice questions. And AI has facilitated a kind of a solution to that, because now it's very easy for a student to take any course material, any module, any assignment, any activity, feed it into ChatGPT and test themselves with GPT generated practice questions. However, as good as that is, and as provocative as that is as a kind of study mechanism, that pace of AI feedback may also be too fast to facilitate student reflection unless we give them an opportunity to do so. And so preparing our students to reflect on the answers that they're getting from AI and what it means to reflect on those answers and really kind of try to seek a deeper understanding of the explanations behind those answers, that's an important part of the process. And then there are, of course, those academic integrity challenges. How do we change the nature of our assessments to take into consideration the availability, the mass availability of AI? I am in favor of, rather than banning the use of AI in every case, redesigning our assignments to take its existence into consideration. So one of my favorite examples of this is from a faculty member at another institution who shared the purpose of this assignment for his students is you will use ChatGPT to answer this prompt. And then your assignment is to reflect on that experience. Could you have done better? And inevitably what he found from the overwhelming majority of his students is their reflection said that they could do better than the answer that AI provided. And that's an important lesson for our students to come away with. And then finally, there is a strong knowledge gap between educators and students and AI systems designers. Not every AI tool out there fits well with the actual needs and actual implementation criteria and factors that would be in consideration for educators or students. And until that gap shrinks, there is still going to be some friction there. But on the plus side, we have a lot of advantages as well. Individualized formative student assessment and tutoring. I mentioned that example of generating practice questions earlier. There's so many wonderful tools now for individualized tutoring using AI. Clinical setting simulation. We are working here at HSC on a pilot right now of generating an AI-powered standardized patient that students could practice with at any time, as opposed to the current practice, which if you want to interact with a standardized patient, well, first we have to recruit a standardized patient, and there's schedules, times, and places and activities where that kind of thing can take place. So, you know, picturing some of the realities that become possible with AI is really important. Active learning strategies. One of my favorite redesigns of a small classroom activity. So an example, asking a multiple choice question to your class in the middle of a lesson. Currently, students will provide their answer and we have a quick discussion and we move on. I love the idea, though, of having AI generate a question live in front of the classroom that the faculty also hasn't seen before. And the prompt for our students in that case is not what's the answer to the question. The initial prompt is this a valid question? Is this a good question? Do we have the information needed to answer this question before we move on? And that's a better experience and a more interactive experience for our students in that moment. The availability of that continuous 24-hour on-demand self-paced learning, wonderful. Cost effectiveness, AI is inexpensive. Program evaluation. We have examples now of sentiment analysis tools that are AI powered that can read course evaluation qualitative comments and sort them by positive, negative, and neutral results and categorize them by what topics they're talking about in those comments. That's of course immediately helpful when it comes to preparing reports even for our accreditors. It saves a lot of time and effort and helps with that entire process. And then finally, of course, most important and the biggest takeaway that I hope that you have from our presentation today is that it helps to prepare our healthcare students for the tools that they will use in the workforce. There's no going back. These tools are here. They're going to stay, and it's our job to prepare our students for it. And so with that, I'm going to pass the baton back to Dr. Ray to talk about a case study from Duke.
That was fantastic, John. I appreciate kind of the summation of just not only what the technology is doing, but the pace of change and the impact it's having on our students and in our healthcare community. I think when AI was in its kind of infancy or the rumors of AI were beginning, I remember the conversations were such around how are we going to protect, how are we going to grade students' essays now that we have AI as a tool that they can use, and those were interesting conversations to be a part of about how reweighting the curriculum or re-emphasizing different aspects in light of AI's existence, as John shared. I think those were helpful conversations, but it took us a minute to go from protecting kind of our educational mission and our educational enterprise from AI to embracing AI as a tool that we are required to help educate and help move the students through that pathway. And so even when this started out, I think at our institution and at many other institutions, the push was we need policies on AI. We need policies on appropriate use for students and policies for faculty and policies for staff on how these tools can be integrated into the workflow and into the educational mission and into the learning environment. And the switch that I'm enjoying watching is going from policies that are protecting us to embracing and utilizing and educating. And John, you gave some great examples, and you even had on the bottom of one of your slides, learning, being in learning and continuing to develop knowledge around that. And I think that that's key that we do that both individually and as institutions. One institution that I think's done a good job of that and has been ahead on some of this is Duke University. And they embraced, I think, one of the earliest kind of guidance, again, not a policy, but guidance to students, guidance to faculty, guidance to staff on the use of that. And so as we advance and look at that, we're not trying to control, we're trying to educate, and we're trying to share with our students and our faculty that this is the shortcomings, here's the utility, here's how it can benefit us, but also stepping back and giving them some control over how they might manage specific assignments. And so John gave another great example of how an instructor may have asked them to use AI specifically on an assignment and then reflect on its use. And that is, evolved thinking in this space. And I appreciate both that example and that pathway. But again, to summarize, and some of this John touched on was around the bias. There is bias or the inaccuracies. I love in the Duke kind of recommendations, it talks about quotes. I mean, I think all of us have been on social media and we've seen quotes attributed to people that did not say what the quote's being attributed to. And so AI can't distinguish that. And so again, educating our audience that here's things that as a tool, how this will aid and enhance us, but here's where the human element needs to come in and be accountable and check and make sure that the sources, the quotes, the bias is tempered as that tool is utilized. If you advance to the next slide, I think we talk about, we can spend hours, and John just spent a great 20 minutes walking through how AI can be that tool, how it can help us, how it can help us stoke the flames, reimagining learning, rethinking assignments again, and gave some tangible examples. So, but that is the approach that I think we're seeing from just the community as a whole as we evolve our thinking and we evolve kind of the process at which we're integrating this into our curriculums. Go ahead on the next. And then stepping back and giving some syllabus control back to the faculty member or the educator. And in that case, providing them, and again, there is some clarity, this is how, from a plagiarism standpoint, from a cheating standpoint, making sure that you're using proper attribution, both to, for example, in the quotes that we talked about, or even referencing the use of AI in the assignment as a critical element, not just as they're embracing the use, but also as they're sharing with that faculty, that educator, this is how I came to these solutions. This was the tools that I used and the references I had associated with that. So again, AI is clearly advancing at a rate that's affecting both healthcare delivery in real time. It's certainly affecting healthcare education in real time, and being knowledgeable about that, being able to embrace it, but embracing it in a way where we're giving guidance on how to use it and not policies and, kind of fencing off the use of it, I think is an important part of that conversation as we continue to advance. Thank you.
I guess it's my turn. I'm Dr. Michelle Forgy, and I'm here to talk about how I harness the power of AI to help my workload and make my life a little bit easier, and share some of that with you guys so that you can also harness the power of AI in your classrooms and make things a little bit interactive and engaging. So I use AI and ChatGPT specifically as a jumping off point to help create activities within my classroom. And one of my favorite activities is a reverse case study. And so case studies are boring. I'm going to be honest. You hand someone a piece of paper and they're just like, oh my God, another case study. This idea for this reverse case study, the way that I do it, was born out of necessity during 2020 when everyone was at home or we were on campus in very small groups, and you'd bring out yet another case study for an on-campus clinical and everybody would just groan and roll their eyes. And so I was like, this can't be it. So when AI really started popping up, I wanted a way to make this a little bit easier on me, because creating a case study takes days if you're doing it right. You have to come up with the scenario, you have to come up with all the lab values and all the distracting things and all the the questions you want to ask. So with AI, you want to identify your objective first. You can't just start throwing stuff in there and asking for it to give you something if you don't know what you're looking for. And before we give anything to a student, we want to make sure that we have a clear learning objective identified for the student. And that is what I start with. What do I want the student to get out of this? And then once I've established that, I prompt AI to give me what I'm looking for. So in this screenshot that you're seeing on this slide, I asked for a scenario of a CHF patient that I can use to create a reverse case study. So when I did that, it gave me a little bit of a scenario, gave me a name, a medical history, current medications. I need to check it for validity to make sure that's really what a patient with CHF would be presenting with, what their lab values are going to look like. Because this gave me lab values, it gave me medication, it gave me interventions. You can prompt it again and ask for a care plan. You can get just about anything you're looking for. Might not be accurate, but it's going to give you an answer. So as faculty, again, it's our job, like John said, to verify what it's giving us to make sure it's accurate. So I use this information to create a patient chart. Then I take that patient chart, and if on the next slide, I'll show you what I do with that patient's chart. I start gathering supplies, and I put all of these supplies in a brown bag. And the name brown bag came from me working at Sonic when I was in high school. I was a car hop on skates, and we had a brown bag special, and it was like a 2-for-1 deal. And so this is a 2-for-1 deal. You get them to be able to touch real life things, because we weren't able to do that during COVID. We weren't able to get into the clinical setting. My very first brown bag special had a blood culture bottle in it, and a student had no idea what a blood culture bottle was. So this gives them the opportunity to touch things, to feel things, to play with things, and really see how they work that they wouldn't normally get in a clinical setting, or that they would need more practice with in outside of the clinical setting. So you gather up your supplies based on your scenario. I have my objectives laid out for them in black and white, so the student knows exactly what they're expected to do. I have my little blurb of the introduction of the patient. I also include lab results or radiology reports. The QR code in this one takes you to an EKG that shows a STEMI. This one is for a STEMI patient. And then all the supplies that that patient would have are put in there with the chart and a little blurb of the scenario. That student gets that bag and that chart and that objective and scenario, and then they are going to write the case study. That takes days of work off of us, right? They get all the things in that case study that they would normally get, but they get to be the one who creates it. So this fosters clinical judgment, because they're really having to think critically about what would this patient have, what would my assessment findings be, because those things are not in there. It is just an introduction of the patient, and it is just the things that they would have on them in the hospital or would need. So here's them collaborating on a renal brown bag special that I developed. It helps bridge that theory to practice gap, because again, they're getting to touch things. That urine that this girl is pulling out of the bag is gross because this patient has urosepsis. So you just mix a little bit of applesauce with some Diet Coke and water, and you've got urosepsis. It makes those case studies a little bit more enjoyable for the student. It helps bring that relevant content in, and instead of it just being words on paper. And they're really excited to get to be in charge of how this happens, because they're like, well, Dr. Forgy, where did they come from? I don't know. You tell me. Did they come from home? Did they come from the side of the road? Is it a nursing home patient? And it really helps contextualize that material, so they are learning while they're doing. And I don't know if I have another slide. So that's my brown bag special. I use AI more than just for that, but this one really helps those students conceptualize that material and help foster that clinical judgment.
I guess that means I'm up next. Thank you, Dr. Forgy. You can go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what John already spoke about in healthcare in general, but I am going to talk about some of the opportunities and challenges and things that we face in nursing in particular, and then also in nursing education. So we already talked about improved patient outcomes. AI-powered systems can analyze patient data to identify potential health risks, allowing for earlier interventions and better outcomes, which as nurses, we absolutely want to intervene early so that we can save lives. There's enhanced patient care. AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants, they provide patients with timely and personalized support, reducing the burden on healthcare providers. All of us have been in a patient portal, and that patient portal can give us assistance, often pointing us to the answer to our questions, whether on the hospital healthcare websites or in that patient portal before we ever get an answer from a doctor. You have streamlined clinical decision making. AI can analyze large amounts of data to support clinical decision making, reducing the risk of human error. But that also leads to some cons, right? Maybe with job displacement, the increased use of AI in healthcare can displace some nursing roles, potentially leading to job losses and changes to the workforce. And then data security concerns, which John addressed earlier. The use of AI requires secure storage and transmission of sensitive patient data, which can be a major concern. Next slide. But in nursing education specifically, we see AI-powered adaptive learning systems that can tailor education to individual student needs. And this allows us to improve learning outcomes and reduce the need for repetition. So we've always had adaptive learning or adaptive questioning on our licensure, the national licensure, our NCLEX. But now through our partners who offer software that we help our students, they can actually tailor the learning of our students through their AI. They can generate those questions that we were spoken about earlier. They can actually generate additional study materials for students based on their needs. AI allows increased access. AR-powered virtual reality and simulation technologies provide students with immersive and interactive learning experiences, increasing access to high-quality education. Most colleges only have 1 or 2 simulation specialists or simulation educators, which means we can only service a clinical group or cohort of students at a time. However, with various softwares that are out there, we can sit a student down and we can allow them to do a simulation just by themselves or as a class. And that simulation can change based on how that student answers, therefore catching their deficits or weaknesses that student may be experiencing, that a teacher sometimes doesn't have the ability to be able to see with an individualized student. So that leads us to enhanced faculty support. It can assist us with meeting the needs of those students who have deficits, who may be weaker, who may have issues with reading a little slower. And so they maybe don't catch on, but they're still great students who will be absolutely great nurses at the bedside. AI also can assist faculty with grading, giving feedback, with curriculum development, freeing up more time for teaching and mentorship. Some of the cons, we've talked a lot about academic dishonesty earlier. Obviously, all of us have that on our mind as we think about utilizing AI. And we actually found some software at my school this semester where the students, it bypasses those shutdown browsers, lockdown browsers, and it will answer test questions for the students. And so we obviously have to find some ways to deal with that, as well as making those policies, as Chris talked about earlier as well, Dr. Ray. In addition, it also has a lack of human touch, right? Because as much as AI can hone in on those weaknesses, or it can allow us to see things that as humans we can't, it doesn't have the compassion. It doesn't have the ability to have the idiosyncrasies that allow us to hone in on little things that a robot or a computer is not going to see, right? Expressions and things like that. And this is especially important in nursing education because everything we do is about our compassion, right? And in healthcare, period, we service our communities at their weakest point, and we want them to feel the care in what we do, not just the rightness of what we do, even though it's allowing us to be more right. And then there's that dependence on technology, right? And over reliance on AI in education leads to a lack of critical thinking and problem solving. And that's why it's important. We heard earlier about that strategy of seeing that, hey, I'm smarter than AI. AI is good, but I'm smarter than it. So allowing them to see that. And if you haven't used AI before, as you begin to explore it, make sure that you are double checking that whatever you're asking it to do is correct. And I know Dr. Forgy will agree with me on this. We've talked a lot about this because she actually, although I was interested in it already, she actually was the one who got me really interested in it and some of the things I could do in the classroom with it. But you absolutely must check to make sure that what it's telling you is correct, because sometimes it's not. You can go ahead and go to my next slide. So that brings us to making sure that we are striking a balance, right? Balancing the benefits and challenges of AI in nursing healthcare and in education. To fully realize the benefits of AI in nursing healthcare and education, we have to balance those advantages with the challenges and ensure that AI is used responsibly and ethically. We have to address concerns around job displacement, data security, and the lack of human touch, which requires collaboration between healthcare providers, educators, policymakers, and industry leaders. And then we have to foster a culture of innovation. We can't be scared of AI. We need to embrace it. Embracing this innovation and creating a culture that supports the responsible use of AI by creating those policies and things, we can harness its potential to improve patient outcomes, enhance patient care, enhance our teaching, and transform the future of nursing. Embracing AI in nursing education can significantly enhance our learning experiences, improve outcomes, and prepare our future nurses to meet the evolving demands of healthcare. Here are some ways that I have effectively integrated AI into nursing education. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So, unfolding case studies are a fun way to use AI, and you got to see that with Dr. Forgy. But I also actually was struggling with creating an escape room for my classroom. I wanted to utilize this idea, and I just couldn't come up with what do I say to get the students from one spot to the other. And what I finally ended up doing is putting it in a chat GPT and saying, this is my patient, I want to create an escape room. How do I get students to go from here to here? And it helped me come up with those clues. And then I was able to go in and tweak it a little bit. And as you can see, our students here, they had a lot of fun doing that. They escaped the escape room. They got to experience something other than just sitting in the classroom to learn CHF and asthma. It included protocols. It included them having to give meds and listen to lung sounds. Actually, listening to the lung sounds was how they started the escape room. They had to look under the gown and listen to lung sounds the correct way to get their first clue. And it sent them to a protocol. We got a lot of really good feedback about this, but this was just one time where, like, as faculty, as professionals, we're smart, right? We got to this point, we're all smart. But sometimes we have a challenge of, hey, I want to do something, but I'm just not being able to grasp how to implement what it is I want to do. And AI helped me do that. Same thing with those unfolding case studies. Sometimes we have an idea, we're like, okay, I know I can utilize this alcoholism patient to teach this concept, and I want it to look like this, but how do I put that all together? And ChatGPT or AI in general can be a very good support for helping you to implement new ideas. If you go to the next one, I will talk about one of the funnest things that I've had the opportunity to do with AI, and that's working with Gamard. I met Angie and Angela at a conference last year, and this baby was on the table moving. And I was like, oh my goodness, is that baby really moving? And it looked real, and it looked like a real baby. And so they started telling me about the simulator, and I got a chance to play with it. And so if you go to the next video, you will get a chance to see one of the fun parts of playing with AI that I've had. Hopefully.
Looks like the video is not playing correctly.
Okay, well, maybe can you put the link in the chat, John, and they can check the video out later. And so I will introduce our next speaker, who is Anjari Kandi, who works with Gamard, and this simulator is made by them. We will have another video later that'll explain a little bit about it. But this simulator can be used in the classroom. So often we're like trying to make a case study come to life for a student, and we're trying to get them to see the picture. But with this particular simulator, it talks to you. And so now I actually have a patient in the classroom. So Anjari, I will give it to you.
Here, actually, for out. So I'm a listener and introduce a lady
Anjari,
and
Anjari, we're having a hard time understanding you.
I am sorry. I am in a situation with before, and so I'm for technical difficulties because I wanted to show the mannequin.
We can't understand you. I think she told. I think we lost her altogether. I'm so sorry.
While we're waiting for her to reconnect, we could do questions.
Go ahead. While we're waiting for her to come back on, yes. Is there anyone that has any questions or comments they want to share?
I'm so sorry. I had to walk out of the simulation lab. Those are the fun parts of being part of a simulation experience, working through those limitations. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, much better.
Okay, perfect. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I think everyone pretty much said the same thing, but some of the most important key takeaways about integrating our advanced high fidelity S5301 HAL. He has an AI algorithm in basically bridging my clinical care experience or critical care background experience and learning the simulation world. It's a collaborative effort, right? You as the instructor having the clinical experience and expertise, inputting that data into the simulator so that the students get the information through a different form of delivery, right? And so the way that our S5301 HAL works is that the students are having conversational speech with the mannequin, and the mannequin, based on the patient data that the instructor put in, they're able to have that conversational speech that's very human-like, right? And so the students will ask questions, the patient simulator will answer, and this approach fosters that critical thinking, right? And it allows them to understand why the patient came in, what's wrong with the patient, and what kind of treatment they need to be receiving. And so all of this together, you know, AI is great in the way that it's growing in all of the different practices, especially in clinical nursing or in the clinical setting. It's important, but it does take the one who's leading the effort to guide it, right? And so the students will learn in a collaborative effort because it's through this approach of being in that simulation room and being able to practice, you know, like they play, right? Like if they were in the real clinical setting. But other than that, I really wanted to show you how he works. He's so neat. He responds to your speech, and so he turns. Oh, there's a video. Perfect. Great. This is a great alternative. I'll let you watch the video so you can get more insight on this.
Hi, my name's Anna. I'm going to be your nurse today. And what brings you in today, Hal?
My head hurts a lot.
From a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is the headache pain?
It is really bad. I think it is a 10.
Hal, can you please move your head to the right? Can you please move your head to the left? Can you please move your head to the center?
Thank you for sharing that video. But basically what you just saw is the most advanced patient simulator. And so with the AI algorithm that has been creatively embedded in within how all of these features of putting it together of perfecting your nursing skills, as well as having the conversational speech, his animatronics and the emotions that he shows, really allows those students to feel like they're taking care of a real patient. Next slide. Next slide, please. All this to say is that S5301 is the new gold standard for critical care in situ simulation training. Next slide. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me at the contact information there.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our speakers. For those of you who joined us today, thank you. If you all have any questions, any stories that you want to share with us or comments about your experiences with AI, please unmute yourself or raise your hand and I can unmute you and take a part in the conversation. Well, if you'll put that last slide up one more time, John. Looks like we don't have any comments. Say some thank yous in the chat. I do want to let you know this webinar was hosted by Addison Academics. We do have our annual conference coming up June 16th and 17th. It will be at Tarrant County College. You can please follow us on LinkedIn or Instagram for any upcoming events. And you can contact us at addisonacademics.org. On our website, there's a contact form if you're interested in having us come and do any of our workshops or consults for you. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you again for joining us. If my speakers can stay on, please.